Ma'am, I said hands behind your back. The officer's voice cracks through the courtroom like a whip, sharp, echoing, dripping with disdain. Dozens of heads turn. A black woman in a navy blue suit, her hair neatly braided, stands frozen beside the defense table. Her hands hover in disbelief as two bailiffs close in, their smirks wide enough to tell the whole story. They're enjoying this. Didn't you hear me? Officer Daniels sneers, stepping closer until his badge nearly touches her face. Or do you people only understand when it's shouted? Gasps ripple through the courtroom. No one moves. No one intervenes. It's supposed to be an ordinary hearing, a property rights case, small, civil, and quiet. But now it's something else. The woman, Amara Cole, swallows hard. Her voice stays steady, though her heart hammers in her chest. "Officer," she says evenly, "you're making a mistake." Daniels laughs, a short, cruel sound that bounces off the marble walls. "Oh, I don't think so," he mocks, glancing back at the other bailiff. "This lady here thinks she runs the place. Tried walking into the restricted area like she owns the court. Probably here to cause a scene." The second bailiff chuckles. "Yeah, maybe she watched one too many legal dramas." The gallery titters. A few people even pull out their phones, because humiliation is entertainment now. "Sir, please." Amara tries again, her tone calm but firm. "If you'll just check my—" "I said quiet." Daniels cuts her off. He grabs her wrist. The sound of the metal cuffs snapping shut is deafening. Her skin reddens under his grip. An older woman in the back row, maybe 60, gray curls and pearls, whispers to her husband. She shouldn't have talked back. "You can't act like that in court. That's all it takes." The room turns cold. No one sees Amara as a person anymore. Just a headline waiting to happen. Daniels pushes her toward the aisle. "Let's go. We'll sort your little story out at the station. Please, my bag." He snatches it up, rifling through it carelessly. Lip balm, notebook, a slim leather case. He opens the case and freezes for half a second. Inside, gleaming beneath the courtroom lights, is a gold-plated ID badge embossed with a national seal. But he doesn't even read it. He tosses it aside. "Fake IDs now, huh?" he says, chuckling darkly. "You're really digging your hole deep, lady." Amara looks straight ahead. Her jaw tightens. "You just made the worst mistake of your career." He leans in close, his breath thick with coffee and arrogance. "The only mistake I made," he sneers, "was thinking you'd know your place in a courtroom." Camera flashes. Someone's live streaming, and somewhere across the room, a clerk quietly slips out the side door because she recognizes that badge. She's seen that same insignia in the morning news. Member of Parliament, United Kingdom, visiting New York for the Global Justice Forum. But Daniels doesn't know that. Not yet. He parades Amara through the hallway like a trophy. Reporters turn their heads. Phones rise in unison. A black woman in cuffs, in a courthouse, always gets views. "Smile for the cameras, sweetheart," Daniels says under his breath. "Guess this isn't your kind of power, huh?" "Power?" she says softly. "You have no idea what power looks like." He laughs again. "Yeah? You gonna tell me you're a queen or something?" She doesn't respond. She doesn't have to. 10 minutes later, in the courthouse holding area, Daniels is still pacing, chest puffed out. The other officers clap him on the shoulder. "Heard you had to take down some protester," one says. "Good job keeping order, man," Daniels grins. Just another entitled one who thought her voice mattered. That's when the doors burst open. Two men in black suits stride in, calm, sharp, deliberate. The kind of presence that makes even veteran cops straighten their spines. Their accents are crisp. British. "Where is she?" one asks. Daniels blinks. "Excuse me?" The taller man flashes a badge. "Diplomatic security. The detained woman is under international protection. You will release her immediately." Daniels' smile falters. "Wait, what?" The second man steps forward. "That woman is Right Honder Amara Cole, Member of Parliament for Bristol North. She's here on official government business, representing the UK in a bilateral justice summit." Silence. The officers glance at one another. Daniel's face drains of color. She said she was important," he stammers. You thought, the agent cuts in sharply, "you could humiliate a foreign government official because she didn't fit your idea of what authority looks like." The handcuffs come off with a sharp click. Amara rubs her wrists but doesn't look at Daniels. Not yet. Instead, she lifts her chin and says, "I'm fine, but I won't be silent about what just happened here." The agent nods grimly. "Madam, the ambassador is on his way. The press already knows." Daniels stares at her, his mouth open. "Ma'am, I didn't know. I thought you were—" Amara finally looks at him. Her expression is calm, almost gentle. "That's exactly the problem, officer. You thought—" She picks up her badge, brushing dust from its surface. The seal glints beneath the fluorescent light, the unmistakable emblem of Parliament. "Next time," she says, "try seeing before you assume." Outside, chaos erupts. News vans swarm the courthouse. Headlines flash. Foreign MP wrongfully arrested in U.S. courtroom. Racial profiling scandal rocks Justice Forum. Inside the courtroom, the judge sits pale-faced, replaying the scene over and over. And in the holding room, Officer Daniels sits on a bench, his career unraveling in real time. By the time Amara steps back into the corridor, her phone is buzzing nonstop. Calls from London, the Prime Minister's office, CNN, BBC. But she doesn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she pauses at the doorway, the same one she entered hours earlier, and glances back at the place where it all began, the laughter. The sneers, the moment she almost believed them. Then she whispers, mostly to herself, "They called me a criminal, but they never saw who I really was." And for the first time since landing in America, she smiles. Not because she's won, but because she knows this story won't end here. The clip hit the internet before Amara even reached her hotel. 32 seconds. That's all it took to turn an entire courtroom incident into an international scandal. A grainy phone video, Officer Daniels laughing, Amara in cuffs, the muffled sound of someone saying, "She thinks she's somebody important." By morning, it wasn't just on Twitter. It was everywhere. Courtroom arrest trended in less than an hour. By noon, it became Parliament power. And by the end of the day, the name Amara Cole was on every major network in America. At first, Amara didn't want to look. She sat in her hotel room, the curtains drawn tight against the Manhattan skyline, her phone vibrating like a living thing on the table. Every time she picked it up, there were more messages. Reporters, friends, strangers. Her mother's voice came through last, shaky, proud, furious. "Baby, I saw what they did to you. You handled yourself like a queen." Amara smiled faintly. "It's fine, Mum. I'm fine." But she wasn't. Not really. She'd come to New York to deliver a keynote on reforming global justice systems. Now she was the center of a justice scandal herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. Meanwhile, in a small police station across the city, Officer Daniels was living a different kind of nightmare. His inbox flooded overnight. Internal Affairs called an emergency review. The captain didn't bother hiding his disgust. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Daniels? You didn't just handcuff a tourist. You handcuffed a sitting member of Parliament." Daniels stammered. "She didn't look like one." The captain slammed his fist against the desk. "What does that mean exactly?" No answer. Just silence, the kind that fills a man's lungs with dread. "Turn in your badge and gun," the captain said flatly. Pending investigation. The officer who once strutted through courtrooms now sat in an interrogation room, staring at his reflection in the one-way mirror. The smirk was gone. So was the swagger. Back in the hotel suite, Amara opened her laptop. Emails poured in, from journalists, fellow MPs, activists, even heads of state. But one stood out. Subject, "You were seen." It was from a woman she didn't recognize, Eleanor Madsen, editor of the New York Ledger. The message was short. "Ms. Cole, your composure in that courtroom will change the way this country talks about power. The world needs your side of the story. If you're willing, we'd like to give you the front page." Amara stared at the words for a long time. Then she typed back, "The story isn't about me. It's about what people think power looks like." By evening, the video reached London. The British Parliament chamber buzzed with disbelief as the clip played on live broadcast. Gasps. Outrage. The speaker demanded a statement. And in Washington, D.C., The British ambassador was already at the State Department, his voice tight but calm. This was not just an arrest, he said. It was an insult to international partnership and to human dignity. Behind the diplomatic language, one truth burned clear. The United States had embarrassed one of Britain's rising political stars, a woman celebrated for her advocacy on equality, education, and cross-cultural diplomacy. Then came the turning point. A reporter from The Guardian released the full video, the uncut version showing what had really happened before the arrest. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't disorder. It was Officer Daniels blocking Amara's entry into a restricted area she had authorization to access, an area where she was supposed to meet U.S. justice, officials for a closed-door briefing. Her credentials were visible in the frame. Her badge clearly marked Member of Parliament. The backlash was instantaneous. Networks replayed it on loop. Talk show hosts tore into the injustice. Church leaders spoke her name from pulpits. She carried herself with grace under fire, one pastor said on Sunday morning. That is what dignity looks like in the face of hate. But the storm didn't end there. Amara's quiet strength became a rallying cry. Black women across professions, judges, lawyers, doctors, and everyday workers began sharing their own stories of being dismissed, doubted, or degraded because they didn't look the part. One viral tweet read, "They called her criminal." But she was Parliament. Amara Cole, shock, power, and grace. By the third day, Amara's face was everywhere. Magazines ran her photo with headlines like, "The dignity that silenced a badge." International outlets called her the woman who stood tall in cuffs. Even the UN Secretary General weighed in. Authority isn't defined by uniform or gender or color. It's defined by how one acts under injustice. Ms. Cole exemplified that. And yet, Amara stayed silent. No interviews, no press statements, just stillness. The kind that makes the world lean forward, waiting. Her aide, Malik, couldn't believe it. "You're letting them control the narrative," he said. "Every hour you stay quiet, they twist it." Amara looked up from her tea. "I'm not staying quiet," she said softly. "I'm waiting for the right moment to speak." Malik frowned. "When's that?" She smiled faintly. "When the noise becomes silence." That silence came 4 days later. The world had moved on to a new scandal, or thought it had, when Amara finally appeared. Live broadcast. Simple setting. No makeup team. No entourage. Just her, standing behind a wooden podium with the seal of Parliament visible in the background. Her voice was calm, measured, steady. In that courtroom, I wasn't treated as a diplomat, or even as a citizen. I was treated as a stereotype. The kind too many women, especially black women, know too well. But I don't share my story for sympathy. I share it to ask one question. What does power look like to you? She let the question hang. Because if it only looks like a uniform or a title or a skin color, then maybe it's not power at all. Maybe it's just permission. For the next 7 minutes, she spoke about reform, representation, and the quiet endurance of those who refuse to be defined by ignorance. By the end, millions were watching live, and across the ocean, even Officer Daniels watched from his small apartment. The glow of the TV flickering across his face as Amara's words echoed, "They called me criminal, but my only crime was existing in a space they thought I didn't belong." He buried his face in his hands. That night, something remarkable happened. Amara's speech was translated into 14 languages within hours. Universities requested it for ethics lectures. Civil rights leaders called it a modern Mandela moment, and somewhere in D.C., a young black law student wrote on social media, "I was going to drop out this week." Then I saw Amara Cole stand in that courtroom. I think I'll stay. 3 days after her televised address, Amara Cole's flight touched down in Washington, D.C. It wasn't a visit she had planned or wanted, but one she couldn't refuse. The U.S. government had formally invited her to meet senior officials to discuss diplomatic cooperation following recent events. That was the polite phrasing. The truth? They were in damage control. The black SUV waiting on the tarmac whisked her through the city's gray drizzle toward Pennsylvania Avenue. Reporters lined the barricades near the White House gates, shouting her name. Flashbulbs popped like thunderclaps. Through it all, Amara remained silent, head high, posture unshaken, the same calm that had captured the world. Malik sat beside her, his phone buzzing non-stop. "Madam Cole," he muttered, scrolling through headlines. "CNN says the president wants to issue an apology himself. BBC's calling it the slap heard across continents." Amara gave a faint smile. "It wasn't a slap, it was a lesson." Malik sighed. "You say that like it makes it easier to swallow." She turned toward the rain-spotted window. "It doesn't, but it makes it worth it." Inside the West Wing, tension hung heavy in the air. The chief of staff stood by the fireplace, flanked by State Department officials and a nervous-looking communications aide. Everyone was aware that one wrong word could turn a diplomatic embarrassment into an international crisis. When Amara entered the room, every conversation stopped. She didn't dress for intimidation. A soft gray suit, pearl earrings, her parliament pin gleaming under the light. But her presence filled the room all the same. The chief of staff extended his hand. "Ms. Cole, we deeply regret what happened in New York. The administration wants to—" "Call me Amara," she interrupted, shaking his hand lightly. "And I'm not here for regret. I'm here for accountability." There it was, the calm steel in her voice, impossible to ignore. The president entered moments later, walking briskly, expression solemn. "Ms. Cole," he began, "let me start by saying how deeply sorry we are. What happened should never have occurred in our country." "With respect, Mr. President," Amara said gently, "it didn't just occur, it was allowed, it was believed. And that belief, that a black woman couldn't possibly be who she said she was, is the real crime." Silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind that forces reflection. The president nodded slowly. "You're right. We can't change what happened, but we can make sure it never happens again." She studied him for a moment. "Then start there." Not with words, with policy. They talked for nearly an hour about implicit bias training, international cooperation, police diplomacy, and the need to redefine what authority looks like. Every now and then, Amara would glance out the window, at the White House lawn where cameras waited beyond the hedges. "Do you want to make a public statement?" the communications director asked. "The world's watching." Amara considered it. Then she shook her head. "I already spoke once. The world doesn't need speeches right now. It needs change." Later that evening, when the press release went live, it wasn't the usual government apology. The White House officially announced a new global justice exchange initiative, a cross-cultural partnership for law enforcement training, co-chaired by Amara Cole herself. Social media exploded again. Some called it a historic win. Others said it was a PR bandage. But for Amara, it wasn't about headlines. It was about leverage, and she planned to use every ounce of it. Meanwhile, back in New York, Officer Daniels sat in his apartment surrounded by unopened mail and unanswered calls. His suspension had become termination. His name was plastered across every screen, every newspaper. Neighbors avoided him. Friends stopped texting. Even his own family told him not to come to the next reunion. He'd replayed that moment in court hundreds of times, her calm face, her badge glinting, his own laughter echoing in the background. The way she'd looked at him before saying, "Do you even know who you're arresting?" And his words, the ones that ruined him, "Doesn't look like anybody important to me." He rubbed his temples. God, what have I done? Oh no. His laptop screen, Amara's White House photo, appeared, standing beside the president, composed and radiant. He couldn't look away. For the first time, shame felt heavier than anger. The next morning, Daniels did something no one expected. He wrote her a letter. It wasn't long, just 2 pages, handwritten, honest. "Ms. Cole, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. I just want you to know I watched your speech. I saw what grace looks like, and I realized the uniform doesn't make the man. The way he treats others does. I failed at that. I'm sorry." He mailed it quietly. No reporters, no PR spin, just truth. A week later, Amara received the letter at Parliament. She read it twice, then set it down beside her tea. For a long while, she didn't move. Finally, she said to Malik, "Tell the press we'll be making one more trip to New York." Malik blinked. "For what?" She smiled faintly. "Closure." The plane touched down just after dawn. New York looked different this time, softer, quieter. The skyline that once seemed like a wall now felt like an opening. Amara Cole stepped out of the terminal wearing the same calm resolve that had carried her through Parliament hearings and presidential meetings. But this visit wasn't political. It was personal, no security detail, no press entourage, just her, Malik, and a single black sedan. "Are you sure about this?" Malik asked, handing her the coffee she hadn't touched. She nodded slowly. "Power isn't proven when the world's watching, Malik. It's proven when no one is." He didn't argue. He knew that look, the one that meant she'd already made up her mind. They drove through the waking city, past the courthouse where everything began. The same marble steps, the same cold facade. For a moment, the memory hit hard. The officer's laughter, the sting of being shoved, the flash of humiliation before the world found out who she was. She closed her eyes, exhaled slowly, and whispered under her breath, "Not this time." I walked back on my own terms. They arrived at a small community center in Queens. Inside, a handful of men in casual clothes sat in folding chairs, heads bowed. A police reform workshop? Voluntary attendance. Part of a pilot program born from Amara's initiative. At the far end of the room sat Officer Daniels. He looked nothing like the man who had mocked her in court. The arrogance was gone. His posture was smaller, almost fragile. He'd lost weight. His uniform was gone, too, replaced with a simple gray sweater and hands that couldn't stay still. When he saw her walk in, he froze. The room went silent. Every officer's gaze shifted to him, then to her. Amara stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the tile. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady but gentle. "I came here today not as a member of Parliament, but as someone who knows what it's like to be judged before you're heard." She turned toward Daniels. "And I believe growth starts with being willing to listen." He swallowed hard, standing up slowly. "Ma'am," he said quietly, eyes down. "I didn't think you'd come," she studied him. "I almost didn't." A beat passed, long, uncomfortable. Then she added, "But your letter—" It sounded like a man who wanted to understand, not defend. He nodded, voice trembling. I didn't know how else to say it. I ruined my life because I couldn't see past my own ignorance." Her expression softened. "Ignorance doesn't ruin lives, Officer Daniels. Pride does." The room shifted, officers leaning forward, listening. The tension between them wasn't anger anymore. It was truth stretching between two people who had both been broken by the same moment, in different ways. Daniels took a shaky breath. "When I pushed you that day, it wasn't just bias. It was fear. You walked in calm, confident, and I thought, there's no way she belongs here, because people like me never belonged anywhere good. And instead of facing that, I turned it on you." Amara's eyes flickered, the first hint of empathy. "Fear disguised as authority," she said softly. "That's the most dangerous kind." He nodded, eyes glistening. "And you didn't raise your voice. You didn't even fight back. You just looked at me like you'd seen it all before." She paused. "Because I had." She walked closer. So close now that the whole room could feel the weight of it. "When I was 22, she began quietly, "I was arrested outside a library in London. I had just been elected to student council. The officer said my ID looked too expensive to be mine. He made me sit on the curb while people stared." She looked around the room, voice unwavering. "I told myself that day I'd never let humiliation define me, but I'd also never let anger become my language. Because when they see your rage, they stop hearing your reason." Silence. You could hear a chair creak in the back row. Then Daniels spoke again, voice cracking. "How do you even look at me after what I did?" Amara smiled faintly. Not forgiveness, not yet. Something deeper. "Because if I don't, then nothing changes. I didn't come here to relive the past. I came so neither of us would be trapped in it." She extended her hand. For a second, he just stared at it, eyes wide. Then, slowly, trembling, he took it. The entire room exhaled at once. It wasn't a handshake. It was a peace treaty, a bridge. A quiet revolution in plain sight. "Officer Daniels," she said softly, "the world doesn't need perfect people. It needs honest ones. You made a mistake. Now use it," he nodded, tears spilling freely. "I will, ma'am. I swear." That evening, photos of the handshake leaked online. Not from Amara's team. Not from the press. From one of the other officers who had filmed the workshop. Captioned simply, "Today, forgiveness looked like leadership." The image went viral. News anchors called it the moment that healed a nation's bruise. Commentators replayed the footage on every major network. And yet, for Amara, none of that mattered. Because the real victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet eyes of a broken man who finally saw her as human. As she left the community center, Malik walked beside her, phone buzzing nonstop again. "Every outlet wants an interview," he said. "BBC, CNN, even Al Jazeera. They're calling this historic." She smiled softly, watching the sunset cast gold over the rooftops. "History doesn't change when people talk about it," she said. "It changes when people learn from it." And with that, she walked into the fading light, the sound of the city rising behind her, alive with a new kind of hope. For 3 straight days, Amara Cole's face dominated every screen in the Western world. The handshake had gone viral, but not everyone saw it as forgiveness. Some saw it as betrayal. Commentators screamed across networks, "She let him off too easy. She made the system look humane when it's broken to the core. She should have pressed charges." Hashtags exploded overnight. Justice, not forgiveness, trended beside "Lead like Amara." 2 nations were arguing about the same woman, one calling her hero, the other hypocrite. Amara sat alone in her apartment that night, the glow from the television reflecting off the window. Clips of her speech looped again and again, her calm voice, the moment her hand extended toward the man who'd humiliated her. But now they played over voiceovers dripping with accusation. She forgave oppression. "She's protecting the system. She's not angry enough." Malik burst into the room, his phone vibrating nonstop. "Amara, we've got requests from every outlet. CNN wants you live tomorrow. Fox is calling it political theater. Even Parliament's asking for an official statement." She turned off the TV and leaned back in her chair, exhausted. "I didn't do it for them, Malik. I did it for us. For every kid who's ever been told anger is their only power." Malik sighed. "Then you have to explain that. Because right now, people are rewriting your story." Meanwhile, across the city, Officer Daniels sat in a tiny apartment surrounded by empty coffee cups and unopened letters. He hadn't left home since the handshake went public. He scrolled through thousands of comments, his name trending beneath hers. Half the country wanted him fired for good. The other half called him proof that people could change. He clicked on one headline, "The officer who mocked a black parliament member, now a symbol of redemption?" He rubbed his eyes, ashamed. "Redemption," he muttered under his breath. "You can't trend your way into forgiveness." But when he looked at the photo again, her hand, steady and sure, he whispered, "Maybe I can earn it." The next morning, Amara appeared on Good Morning America. The host leaned in, eyes sharp. "Miss Cole, people say you made the system look merciful when it isn't. That your handshake gave comfort to those who don't deserve it. What do you say to them?" Amara looked directly into the camera. "My forgiveness wasn't approval," she said calmly. "It was resistance. You don't heal what you hate. You heal what you face." The studio fell silent. She continued, voice unwavering. "I didn't shake his hand because I forgot. I shook it because I remember. I remember what it felt like to be powerless. And I refuse to become the same thing I fought against." That single line, Forgiveness is resistance. Broke the internet. Clips of her interview flooded TikTok and Facebook. Churches quoted it in sermons. High school debate teams used it as case studies. Even police academies started mandatory seminars on implicit authority and emotional awareness. But with the praise came the hate. Online trolls bombarded her inbox with messages. You're weak. You're playing the victim. Stay in your lane. Her security team reported threats. Her team begged her to take a break. But Amara refused. Every woman who stood before me, she told Malik, didn't have the luxury of resting. Why should I? Weeks passed. The movement kept growing. Across the country, citizens held bridge forums, public gatherings where communities and police officers spoke face-to-face for the first time. Some ended in tears, some in shouting. But they were talking, something no one thought possible 6 months ago. Parliament passed the Cole Amendment, requiring all public officers to complete empathy-based leadership training. The UN invited Amara to speak at the Global Leadership Summit, and Officer Daniels, against the odds, was hired as an instructor for that very training, teaching younger officers what humility really meant. But success brought isolation. Late one night, Amara sat on her balcony, the city alive below her. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, another news clip, another invitation. She turned it over and stared at the sky. She missed being invisible. She missed just being Amara. Malik joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Do you ever wonder, she said finally, if changing the world costs you the people who once made you human? He looked at her, the exhaustion beneath her strength, the loneliness behind her power. Maybe, he said softly. But you didn't just change the world, Amara. You reminded it what humanity looks like. She smiled faintly, tears threatening. Then I hope the world remembers. By dawn, Amara's speech clip had reached 200 million views. In classrooms, teenagers analyzed her words. In offices, executives replayed them during diversity training. In churches, preachers quoted her to congregations that had never said her name before. And in the quiet apartment in Queens, Daniels replayed the interview too, this time with his young daughter sitting beside him. Daddy, she whispered, is that the lady you pushed? He swallowed hard. Yeah, sweetheart. She watched for a moment, then said softly, she looks kind. He nodded, tears in his eyes. She was. And because she was kind, I'm gonna be better. Across oceans, across timelines, across hearts that once refused to listen, the ripple of one act of grace kept expanding. But Amara knew one thing for sure. The louder the world argued about her choice, the more important it had been to make it. The United Nations Assembly Hall shimmered beneath 1,000 camera flashes. Dozens of flags swayed slightly in the air-conditioned hush. Colors from every corner of the planet now gathered to hear her. For the first time in history, the keynote speaker at the Global Summit on Justice and Leadership wasn't a diplomat, a scholar, or a president. It was Amara Cole, the black woman once shoved in a courthouse hallway. When she walked onto that stage, silence rippled through the room like a wave. Even the translators paused for a heartbeat, waiting, watching. The same hands that once trembled under handcuffs now held the world's attention. The Secretary General introduced her simply. Some people lead with power. Others lead with presence. Miss Cole reminds us that dignity is not weakness. It is the world's most powerful weapon. Applause filled the hall, but Amara didn't smile. She looked out across the rows of suited leaders and whispered to herself, "Don't perform. Tell the truth." Then she began. "When I was shoved to the ground, I wasn't just pushed by one man," she said, voice calm but edged with fire. "I was pushed by centuries of silence, by uniforms that forgot their oath, by systems that mistake control for safety." Her words echoed through the marble chamber. "But when I stood back up," she continued, "I realized something else. The world doesn't change because you fight louder. It changes because you stand longer." The audience leaned in. Her tone wasn't angry. It was haunting, measured, deliberate. Every pause carried weight. I didn't shake his hand because I'm soft, she said, her gaze steady. I shook it because I'm tired. Tired of proving that pain makes us real. Tired of teaching empathy through our suffering. The hall was silent. Even the interpreters' voices cracked in their headsets. Amara took a step forward. Behind her, a massive screen displayed photos, protests outside courthouses, police standing beside community leaders, children in classrooms holding signs that read, "I forgive because I'm free. You've all seen my story," she said. But you missed something important. She pointed toward the screen, to a photo of Officer Daniels, standing beside a group of new recruits at a training session. That man, the one who humiliated me, now teaches empathy to officers across the country. Not because I demanded his punishment, but because I offered his redemption. Gasps murmured through the audience. This is not about excusing cruelty, she said firmly. It's about breaking the cycle that keeps us chained to it. As she spoke, live captions appeared in dozens of languages on massive screens. In villages, schools, and churches around the world, people watched, some crying, some clapping, some just staring in disbelief. Amara's speech wasn't written like a politician's. It was spoken like scripture. Every sentence was built to last. Forgiveness, she said, is not forgetting. It's remembering differently. Without letting hate decide what comes next, she paused. Her next line came quiet, almost like a confession. I learned that day that anger is fuel, but if you drink it, it burns you from the inside out. In the front row, the British Prime Minister whispered to his aide. She's rewriting moral leadership in real time. But Amara wasn't finished. She motioned to the translators' booths above. You hear my words in your own languages right now, she said. But imagine if empathy worked the same way. If pain, respect, and courage translated as easily as English or French. A ripple of applause began, cautious at first, then swelling into a roar. Amara smiled softly, but her eyes glistened. This isn't about me, she said. It's about what happens when the silenced stop waiting for permission to speak. Then she turned her attention to the world leaders. You have the power to sign laws, she said. But laws can't teach people how to see each other. Her voice rose, trembling slightly. You want justice? Start by treating every person you meet as someone's child, not someone's problem. Every delegate rose to their feet. It wasn't just applause. It was awakening. Even the Secretary General stood wiping his eyes. The thunderous ovation echoed for over 3 minutes. When the clapping finally faded, Amara stepped back from the podium. Before I leave, she said quietly, I want to tell you one last thing. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the letter Officer Daniels had sent her a month before. My daughter asked me why I pushed you, it read. I told her I was afraid of things I didn't understand. She told me she hopes to be like you one day, brave enough to face what scares her. Amara looked up. That letter, she said, is the reason I still believe change is possible. Because maybe it's not about erasing the past, it's about redeeming it. The crowd erupted again, louder, longer, unstoppable. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. Global headlines began forming before she even left the stage. Amara. Cole redefines justice at UN Summit. From humiliation to humanity, the speech that changed. Everything. Forgiveness is resistance, and the world finally listened. As she walked backstage, Malik met her with tears in his eyes. You did it, he whispered. She smiled faintly. No, she said, we did. But before they could leave, a security officer approached. Ms. Cole, the Secretary General requests your presence for a private meeting. They want to discuss something historic, Malik frowned. Historic how? The guard hesitated, then smiled. They're drafting a new global declaration, and they want to name it the Cole Principle. Amara froze. The what? The principle, he explained, that empathy isn't weakness. It's the highest form of strength. She exhaled slowly. Her entire life, the humiliation, the outrage, the pain, had led to this one quiet truth. And for the first time since that day in court, Amara allowed herself to cry, not out of anger, not even out of pride, but because she finally understood what her grandmother meant when she used to say, "Grace doesn't make you small, child. It makes the world big enough for everyone." 2 months after the UN summit, Amara's face was everywhere. Her speech had become the most watched political address in the world. Over 900 million views translated into 47 languages. Children recited her lines in classrooms. Universities added the Cole Principle to their ethics curriculum. Police academies worldwide began showing her video during training. Even the officer who once mocked her, Daniels, was now a public advocate for reform, traveling with her to conferences, shaking hands with the same grace she once offered him. On paper, the world had changed. In real life, Amara hadn't slept in weeks. At 3 a.m., her apartment in London was still lit by the faint blue glow of her laptop screen. Emails poured in, invitations, praise, threats, questions. Everyone wanted a piece of her peace. "Ms. Cole, please speak at our summit." "Ms. Cole, can we use your quote for our campaign?" "Ms. Cole, how does it feel to be the face of forgiveness?" She would read each one slowly, her eyes dry, her hand trembling. Sometimes she whispered to herself, "It doesn't feel like anything." The world wanted the symbol, but Amara was still just a woman, exhausted, scarred, and sometimes angry that Grace had made her famous instead of free. One night, Malik found her standing on the balcony overlooking the city. The streets shimmered with rain, headlights tracing ribbons of light below. "You're burning out," he said softly. "I'm fine," she lied. "No, you're not." He stepped closer. "You forgave the man who humiliated you. You healed a nation. But who's healing you?" Amara stared at the skyline. "They don't want me to heal," she whispered. "They just want me to keep proving that kindness works." Malik reached for her hand. "You don't owe the world another miracle, Amara." She looked at him with tired eyes. "That's the thing," she said. "They don't want miracles. They want me to be proof. Living proof that pain can be polite." Weeks passed. During a speech at Oxford, she stumbled mid-sentence, the first time she'd ever lost her composure on stage. Her voice cracked as she tried to say the line that had made her famous. Forgiveness is not forgetting. But this time, she couldn't finish. She stared at the crowd, all waiting for her calm, perfect answer, and finally said quietly, "Sometimes forgiveness feels like disappearing." The hall went silent. Reporters didn't know whether to clap or comfort her. That night, back in her hotel, she received a letter. No return address, just her name written in a child's handwriting. Inside was a drawing. A little girl standing between two police officers holding both their hands. Beneath it were 4 words written in shaky pencil. "I want to be brave." Amara pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Later, she visited her grandmother's old house in Kingston, the one with the mango tree out front and the chipped white porch. She hadn't been there since before everything changed. The neighborhood kids recognized her instantly, shouting, "Miss Cole, the lady from the news!" She laughed, waved, and handed them sweets from her bag. When the children ran off, she sat beneath the mango tree and finally let herself breathe. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Child, the world will always test the size of your heart. Just make sure it doesn't shrink you." Amara looked up at the sky, the same soft blue her grandmother used to call God's handwriting. And for the first time she whispered, "I forgive myself too." The next morning she made a decision. She turned down 5 speaking invitations, canceled 2 international panels, and instead sent out a statement that stunned the press. "For now, I am stepping away from public life. Grace doesn't belong on a stage. It belongs where people can live it quietly. I'll be spending the next year listening, not leading." Critics called it a retreat. Supporters called it the most powerful act yet. But Amara didn't care what they called it. For the first time, she wasn't performing forgiveness. She was living it. 6 months later, a photo surfaced online. It wasn't official, not staged. Just Amara sitting on a wooden bench in a small London park, surrounded by neighborhood kids reading books she'd donated. No makeup, no microphones, no banners, just peace. And beneath that viral photo, someone had commented, "Funny how the woman who changed the world did it by walking away from it." It became the most liked comment under the post. 5 years later, the world looked different. Not because laws changed overnight, but because one woman's courage had reshaped how people listened. In London's National Gallery of Justice, a permanent exhibit titled The Cole Principle drew visitors from every country on Earth. On one wall, a photo. The moment Amara stood before the crowd in court, hand raised, face calm, voice steady. On another, her words carved in glass. Power doesn't mean louder voices. It means deeper understanding. Children on field trips would stand in front of that quote, their teachers explaining how one act of grace had become a movement. But across the hall, hidden from the flashier displays, was a smaller section. Letters of change. Thousands of handwritten notes pinned to the wall from people whose lives had been touched by her story. I was a police recruit. I almost quit. Your story reminded me why I joined. I'm 14. I used to be scared to speak up in class. Now I'm running for student president. You made me call my mom after 5 years of silence. Every single letter began the same way. Dear Ms. Cole. Outside that museum, life went on. Taxis honking, street vendors shouting, the ordinary rhythm of a world quietly becoming better. But one afternoon, a small black car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Minister of Justice Malik Porter, older now, more silver in his beard, but still carrying that same fire in his eyes. He smiled as a group of students recognized him. "You knew her, didn't you?" one of them asked. He nodded softly. "Yes," he said. "She taught me that justice isn't about punishment. It's about possibility." He looked up at the building one last time, and for a brief second, his reflection aligned with hers in the glass display. Then he whispered, "You did it, Amara." Across the city, in a quiet community center that once served as a shelter for young women, laughter filled the halls. A wooden sign over the door read, "The Amara Foundation, Leadership Through Grace." Inside, children practiced debate, art, robotics, and conflict resolution. Every wall carried stories of women and men who'd been underestimated, mocked, or dismissed, and turned that pain into progress. And at the center of the main hall stood a mural of Amara Cole beneath her favorite quote from her grandmother. "The world will always test the size of your heart. Just don't let it shrink you." But the story didn't end in a museum or a foundation. It lived in everyday moments. A police officer in Atlanta choosing to de-escalate instead of arrest. A judge in Nairobi quoting the Cole Principle before a major ruling. A teenage girl in Kingston standing up to her teacher and saying, "Respect is not age, it's integrity." A mother in Chicago teaching her son that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strategy. Each of them, in their own small way, carried a spark of Amara's light, even if they never knew her name. And then, one spring morning, the world woke up to breaking news. Former MP and global reformer Amara Cole passes away peacefully at age 48. No scandal, no tragedy, just peace, the kind she had fought so hard to give everyone else. Within hours, the streets of London filled with flowers. Not from politicians or dignitaries, but from ordinary people. Nurses, bus drivers, students, street vendors, each leaving notes that began with the same 2 words. "Thank you." At her memorial, Malik Porter stood before a quiet crowd. The same courthouse steps where she once stood alone now overflowed with faces of every color, every faith, every generation. He took a deep breath and said, "They laughed when she entered this building. They silenced her voice because it made them uncomfortable. But now, Her silence is louder than their power ever was. He looked up at the sky, voice trembling. You once told me grace was the hardest weapon to master. You were right, Amara, but you also showed us it's the only one that wins. That night, social media flooded with one simple phrase, shared by millions worldwide. The Cole Principle, Lead with Grace teachers, painted it on classroom walls. Police academies printed it on badges. And one small schoolgirl in Ghana posted a video saying, "One day, I want to be like Amara Cole, but I also want to be me." Because she said that's enough. The clip went viral, viewed 200 million times in 48 hours, and just like that, the next chapter of the movement began, not with applause, but with a whisper. Listen first. Love louder. Years later, in that same museum, the light from the skylight hit Amara's portrait just right, casting a soft golden glow across her face. Tourists would often say it felt like she was smiling, and beneath that portrait, in small engraved letters, was her final message to the world. The world doesn't change when you win. It changes when you forgive and keep walking.